Okay, so step one in installing a landscape lighting system is really just determining what kind of lights you want to use. On average, you're typically going to be using either an uplight or path light for 90% of your project. And if you're a do-it-yourselfer and it's your first time, I would recommend getting a good quality fixture, like an uplight like this, that takes an MR16 bulb, like this, that you can go and you can interchange if you need to. So a good LED bulb will last you, anywhere from 10 to 50,000 hours depending on the quality. And the reason I like doing that is because if you install the light and you don't think it's bright enough or it doesn't look quite the way you want to, you can go and change that bulb out later with a brighter intensity one, a wider degree, and whatnot. And same thing with path lights. You can get a good quality LED path light that you can change the intensity down the road if you don't like the way it looks. So that's why I recommend a good quality light with a drop-in bulb like this, because then you can go and make changes. So one thing in determining the lights is just really going around and seeing what's going to look nice. 2 or 3 quick ways to do that is, one is just with a flashlight at night, going and shining the light on a couple areas to see what looks good. Another way is these battery operated packs that you can they run off AA batteries that you can hook the actual fixture that you're using into, and then you can go around and you can start lighting up some things and see what looks good. Another cheaper alternative, if you bought a good landscape light, you should be able to run that light with just a simple 9-volt battery, just by taking the 2 wires from your fixture and holding them onto the terminal. Should turn on your light, and you can go around and you can play with different areas and see what's going to look good on your property. So on this project, we've determined that we're going to use really 4 different types of lighting styles. The first one we're going to use is we're going to use some in-ground lights that we're going to get actually in the ground so they can be mown over. That we're going to light some big spruce trees here behind me. We're going to use some accent and up lights that we're going to have at the base of a couple trees to get some light up into there, as well as we're going to use some wash lights. This house has some beautiful stonework that they've done on it, that we're going to use those to light those areas up. It's just a little bit of a softer light. And then the last one we're going to use is we're going to use some hanging lights. We're actually going to get them up in the trees and have them shining down to just light up the foliage and the branches and stuff from above. So those are the 4 lights that we're going to choose for this project. Basically, the first step, once I've determined what lights I'm going to use, is I actually go around and I just preliminarily place all the lights. So put the lights where you think you're going to want them and just have them set so that you can go around and then wire everything together afterwards. So for this spot, we're going to use a wash light because we have some nice rock work and stonework here. We want to cast some shadows off of that. So basically a wash light, all it is very similar to an accent light. The only difference is it tends to have a wider beam angle, usually around 120 degrees, as well as it's got a frosted filter on it that just softens the light so it creates less hot spots. So this is a light that I would use anywhere that you're trying to light up the house or light up some stonework or anything like that. It's a great light for that. So that's why we've chosen to use a wash light in this area. So here's just an example again of our uplight, accent light. Different people call it different things, but you'll find these in 90% of landscape lighting jobs. Really just used to light up the trunk and the base of a tree and get the light up into the foliage. We do use these a lot, and if you do have an older landscape lighting system, maybe it's a halogen system that the lights just don't work anymore. Generally, these are pretty easy to go and retrofit into LED. They all come apart differently, but usually there's just a bulb in there that'll pull out of a socket, and you get a good outdoor rated LED bulb, usually called an MR16 bulb, and you can just pop that right into the socket and retrofit your existing system to LED that easily. So that's why we like these lights, because it does give us a bunch of options, and it does look really good when you can light up a tree with them. So behind me we've got this great landscape spot with this nice ash tree, and what we've chosen to do here is actually light it from above with one of our hanging lights. So basically this will actually go up in the tree and shine down on the foliage, on the ground cover, as well as on the trunk, to give us a little bit of just a different lighting technique than you usually see it just throwing one at the base. We did also throw a light at the base here just because it looks good when you can get it from above and below, but yeah, just an example of how we would go and use a hanging light up in a tree in an area like this. We're going to use on this project, these again are 2 of my favorite lights. We're going to be using a LF wall light. This is going to be a nice barbecue area, and they're going to have a nice stone stone tabletop on here that's actually going to lean over and cover this, so really all you're going to see is the lighting effect on the stonework on the base of this. I like this light because you can tuck it just about anywhere and it totally disappears, and all you really see is the effect. So we've basically got 4 of those around this barbecue area. And then the other light we're going to use is we have a nice pergola that we're going to have some hanging lights that we're going to feature on the top of these. We're only putting 2 because we don't need to light up the whole area. We're just trying to create a nice ambient light. So that's why we've chosen our VE hanging light also for this project. So again, 2 of my favorite lights, and we're going to use them in this project. So once you've got your light selected and your transformer selected, the next step is just to go around and start placing all your lights so that you can run out your wire. Usually I'll just dig a small hole, place my ground stake, and then try and get a rubber mallet so that you can hammer that light fixture in there, nice and solid in the ground. Especially when it comes to path lights that are going to be standing up, you want to make sure those are level and that they're not going to get knocked over. So go do that with all your lights, place them where you think they're going to want to go, and then you can start running out your wire. So now that I've got all my lights placed around the property, I'm just going to go and run the wire above ground to it, starting from my transformer, running it out to all my lights. And at every light, this is one thing I highly recommend, is leave yourself some extra wire just in case you want to move that down the road. If you ever need to make repairs or anything down the road, it's way easier if you've got extra wire to work with. So go ahead and run all your wire out from each and every fixture all the way to the end, and then from there you can start wiring your lights together. Okay, I'm going to show you 2 examples of how to use your BVS2 snap lock connectors. So, one of the questions I get asked all the time too is that there's 2 ways to wire these. One is when you have your wire coming to your light and then it keeps going out. How do you wire that? And if your light is at the end of the line, how do you use these to wire that? So for example, this is a light fixture that's at the end of the line, meaning there's no more lights after this one. So we just have one wire, one 12-2 wire coming to this fixture, and then we have our wire from our fixtures. So the way we do that now is we still have 2 connections at every single fixture, but now we're going to use our BVS2 snap lock connector. We're going to take our 12-2 wire, and that's going to fit into one of the ports, and each of these connections has 3 ports. That's for if we have another light ongoing, which I'll show you in a second. And then our fixture wire goes into one of the other ports, and then those simply snap tight and hold those wires in place. And then we do the same thing with our other set of wires, fixture wire, our 12-2 wire. We open these up, our wires go in, snap tight, and that's our connection here. So we're going to wrap those wires up and then bury those at the fixture. Here's the example now of, like I mentioned, we already have our wire buried. So we've got a wire that's coming from one direction, we've got our fixture in between, and then we've got our wire that's going to go out to our next fixture. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take that wire and we're just going to cut into it now. And same as always, we're going to strip approximately 1 inch off each end. So that's our wire that's going to go out to our next fixture. And then we have our wire coming into this fixture that we're going to do the same. Strip the ends off that. And then as you're looking at your BVS2 connectors, you'll notice that there's 3 holes, and that's why we're going to use it for this fixture in between. So you've got your smaller 18 gauge wire coming from your fixture that's going to go into the smaller port. You push that all the way in, and then you've got your wire that's coming in from your last light, and you're going to push that all the way in. And then you've also got your wire now that's going out to your next light, and you're going to push that all the way in, and then you're going to snap that down tight, and then you should still have 3 wires left. You've got your 18 gauge wire from your fixture, you've got your line coming in, and you've got your line going out. And again, there is no positive or negative, so it doesn't matter if it's the exact same wire throughout, as long as you've got all 3 of those wires going into your connection. Snap those tight. Those wires aren't coming out, and now you go and bury those wires and you've got your connections done. On this project, we're mounting a lot of lights up in the trees and kind of downlighting, getting those lights up nice and high, 20-25 feet up there, shining through the branches, so we can kind of create some shadowing down on the ground here. So the thing with that is the wire for the fixtures we have is only it's only about 10 feet long, so I don't want to have a big waterproof connector hanging halfway down the trees. One thing you can do, if that's something you have, is just go buy a junction box at you know, the Home Depot store or Lowe's or whatever it is, and just put that connection in one of those, just so you don't have to look at it. At least it hides it. Another option that we often use is these shrink wrap connectors. Again, you can get them at any home improvement store. What I like about them is they are gel filled here, so once they get, sorry, bee on me here, but they are gel filled, so once they heat up, the gel actually seals around the connection, and they're very inconspicuous, so that's why I like using them. So we're going to use them for this. So I've got my wire to my fixture, so I want to make that a lot longer, and then I can make my connections down in the ground and stuff. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to I've got my wires, I'm just going to slide my tube on, because you need to get your tube on the wires first. So we got that on, and one thing I do is I cut, if you can see here, I cut one of them a little bit shorter than the other, and I'll show you why I do that. It's basically so I can cheat and just use one of these as opposed to having to use 2, which, same as any of the connections, usually you have to make 2 for each fixture because you have 2 wires, but we're going to cheat a little bit and I'll show you how. So basically what I've done is, with my wire that's going out into the ground and my fixture wire, I have one longer and one shorter. So I'm going to take the longer one and I'm going to connect it with the shorter one, and I'm actually just going to twist tie those up, just twist them together nice and good, and then I'm going to just bend one of them so it kind of looks like this, right? I don't know if you can see that. So I've got it like this, and I've just got it bent, and then I'm going to twist the other 2 together, and I'll show you in a second why I do that. And then we're going to twist that, is so that I can go now and I can bend these like this, and the connections aren't going to be touching each other. See how they're separated? So they're not going to be touching each other inside the same shrink wrap connector. They're both in there, they're not touching. Something else you can do just to make sure is sometimes I'll put some electrical tape just around those, just to make sure those connections don't touch, and then I'll go and I will shrink wrap that together. So how you do that is very simple. Is you just need a torch of some kind, and then you just lightly warm that up, and you watch it shrink. You're going to be careful not to get too close and burn anything. Make sure all the wires are still inside. It's pretty hot afterwards, so give it a good little, I just try and seal it up a bit, but you can see the ooze is kind of coming out a little bit, so it's all waterproofed in there, and once it solidifies, it's pretty hard, and you are not pulling those wires apart. So if you're doing any tree lighting or need to hide some wire and extend it and make a pretty inconspicuous connection, shrink wrap connectors is a really good way to go. I wanted to give you a little more context when you're wiring the lights, because I always get this question as how to wire the lights, and at the end of this I'll show you the video where I kind of walk you through it, but some people just need a diagram, so that's why we did this video. So I'm going to show you how to wire your lights and what it should look like. So first off, when I talk about the 12-2 cable, it comes together like this, and you split it at the fixtures. So if you look at my diagram here, when you have these 2 wires coming, it's actually just the 1 wire, but it's already kind of split in 2. So how you go about wiring your lights now. So say you've got your lights that come from your transformer. As you split that 12-2, there's
two taps or two ports in your transformer that each one of those ends goes into of that 12-2 cable. And then you run it out to your existing fixture. Now, what's going to happen is one of those wires from the 12-2 is going to go into your BVS2 snap lock connectors, and then there's another port where another one is going to come out and go to that's going to go out to the next fixture, wherever that might be, and then you have a smaller port in there that is going to have your wire from your fixture going into it. So in essence, you're going to have 3 wires going into each one of these, and at each light, you're going to have 2 of those because you've got one wire going in, you've got one wire going out, and then you have your fixture wire coming in. And then you have your other wire that's going to come into your other connector, and it's going to go out to your next fixture, and then you're also going to have your wire from your fixture going into your connector. So at every single light, you're going to have 2 of these connections, whether that be the last light or the first light. And I'll show you a close-up of this in a second, but I just wanted to give you the general idea of that first. Another question I get asked all the time is what if I need to split into my 12-2 cable and run some wire out to another light that's off in the distance? Well, you can do that. The only thing is you're probably going to use a different connection. We often use a DBRY connection. The reason being is that the BVS2 connectors, which I'll show you a little closer up, have 2 larger ports and 1 small port. So you're not going to get 3 12-gauge wires in that. So that's why we use these guys. Plus, these are very, very solid waterproof connections. So how that looks now is you still have your 12-2 cable that's going out, and one of those wires is going to go into your connector, and then one of the wire, you're going to have a wire that's going to go out to wherever your next fixture is, and then you're also going to tee in, and you're going to have that wire going to wherever you need it to. And then same thing, that other wire on that 12-2 strand is going to come in, it's going to go out, and it's going to go out to your other fixture. So that's how you tee into a line, and I get asked all the time, and yes, absolutely, you can do that. The other question I get asked all the time is, what about the last fixture? How do I go and wire that with these connections? Well, you still have the same 3 ports, which again, I'll show you a close-up in a sec here. But just to give you an idea, so wherever your last fixture is, you're going to have that 12-2 wire is still going to keep coming out. And then of those 2 wires in that 12-2, one is going to go into the BVS2 connector, and then the fixture wire is still going to go into the smaller port on that BVS2 connector. And you're going to do that with the other portion of the 12-2 wire is going to go into your connector, and then your fixture from your light is going to go in. So in essence, the last fixture on the run is only going to have 2 wires going into it, as opposed to these ones that actually have 3 wires, like we talked about, right? In, out, and fixture, in, out, and fixture. So you have 3 connections here, or 3 wires going into these connections, whereas on your last fixture, you only have 2. And what that looks like a little closer up is like this. So if you can see here, we got 3 ports on our BVS2 connectors. Again, I like these because they're gel filled. These yellow things, they open up so that you can slide the wire in, and then they snap down on the wire to keep it nice and tight. But if you see here, we've got our 12-2 cable coming in. We're going to split that, and one of those 12-2s is going to go into there, and then it's going to also come out and go to our next fixture, and then we've got our wire from our fixture going into the smaller port. And then with the other part of the cable from the 12-2, it's going to go into the other connector, it's going to go out to the other fixtures, and then you're going to have the fixture wire is going to go into that smaller port. So just a close-up of how that wiring connection should look. And then on your last fixture, it's going to look like this. You're going to have, so this is going to keep going, and you're going to have your 12-2 cable still coming to this last fixture, but here now, instead of the 3 connections, we only need, the 3 wires going in, we're only going to have 2 because it's our last light on that run. So the 12-2 cable goes into the connection, and then in the smaller port, we got our fixture wire, right? And then same thing, that wire gets split, it goes into the port on the BVS2 connector, and then you have your fixture wire, and that's the end. So on any fixtures that are in line, you're going to have 3 connections because you got to go in, out, and your fixture wire. And on the last fixture of the line, it's going to go in and basically just have your fixture wire, and you're going to have 2 of those at every light, no matter if it's your last fixture or if it's a fixture that's in line. And then lastly, I'll just show you a close-up of what it looks like when you tee into a line. So say you've got a light here, you've got a light here. You've left some extra slack because you've watched all our videos, and we say always leave extra slack here so that you can tee in or add on down the road if you have to. Well, this is how this is going to look. So you've got your fixture and you've got your 12-2 cable coming, and you need to tee it in. So you've got it coming into your DBRY connector, and you've got it going out, and then you've got another wire that's going to go to wherever that T is that you want that wire to run. And then the other half of that 12-2 wire, same thing. It's going to go into that connection. It's going to come out to your next fixture, and then you're going to have that extra wire that you just put in to T. And again, the reason we use these is just it's a larger hole, and it allows us to get 3 of those 12-2 cables in there. So
now I'm going to show you some tree lighting examples and how we do that. Now I'm going to do it down low here. I've got my ladder. I'm going to go put it up in the tree, but it's tough to get my camera up there. So this is how we do it. We do it with these tree mount stakes, and the reason I like these is they're no maintenance. Sometimes you'll see people will mount lights to trees just using like a regular bracket, but what happens is as that tree grows, eventually grows right over that bracket, right over the wire and all that. So I'm going to show you how to do this properly so that you don't have to worry about that. It's with these tree stakes. Super easy. See, the light screws actually into the top of here, and then this screws into our tree. So basically what I do is I just get it started with the hammer, get it in there a little bit, and then you can just use any screwdriver or anything. There's a little hole here, and you can just tighten that on. Keep spinning until you get it all the way in there. And the nice thing about that is now as the tree grows, it's easy to go and back that off. So as the tree starts getting wider and starts getting closer to the end, all you have to go do is do the opposite now, and you can just slowly back that off a little bit. So that's why I like that. Once you got it in there, pretty simple. Then your fixture is just a 1/2-inch thread, just pops in there and screws in. Now I don't have this all the way in, so it's not going to be super steady, but it'll give you the right idea. And then you just make your adjustments, shine it down. One thing I will say is anytime you're doing downlighting, something you do want to do is get one of these hex baffles. I don't know if you can see this little honeycomb. Sorry, this bee's bugging me here. This little honeycomb shaped filter. Basically what that does is it just goes underneath the lens. And then now when that's shining down, it helps deflect the glare, because especially with downlights that are shining down, if you walk right under it or kind of in the proximity of it, sometimes it's shining right in your eye. What this does, it helps deflect that a little bit, so it's not as bright in your eye. And then lastly, the other question I get is how do you go and secure the wire to the tree? Because you can leave it just dangling like this, which is great, but then it's visible and people don't always like that. So how you can go secure that is actually just use these zip ties with screw holes in it. Again, another reason that we use those is because it's easy to go and back that screw off as that tree grows bigger, because so many times I see people who just screw the wire or staple it to the tree or something, and then within a year or two you can't find that wire anymore because the tree's grown right over it. Well, this eliminates that, and basically all you do now is you go and you screw that zip tie to the tree, and then you can go now put the zip tie around the wire, and then you can secure it to the tree. But what it does too is not only does it keep it from the tree growing around it, but as that tree grows, now the wire has some play so it can grow with it. So at the base, anytime you do tree lighting, you want to leave a little bit of wire coiled up and buried so that tree can grow, and you can just keep pulling that wire up. And if you need to, over time, you can back this off. That's how you keep lights in trees for a long, long time. And with the lights that we use, they're designed for that. They're not designed to only be up there for 3 to 5 years. They're designed to be up there for as long as you want them to. So that's how you go properly mount a light in a tree to get that cool downlighting effect we talk about all the time. So the last thing I'm going to explain on this property is a transformer and how to size that properly. I'm not mounting this one right here, but anytime you're going to mount this, you want to just mount it close to a GFCI receptacle, somewhere that you can plug it in, and all that does is it converts that 110 volt power that comes out of the house down to 12 or 15 volt that is going to go to your system. and that's what makes it low voltage, and that's what makes it safe to handle. And I always get asked, well, how deep do I need to bury the wires? Do they need to be to code? Do they need to be 12 inches, 24 inches? And because it's low voltage, really they only got to be deep enough that you're not going to be digging them up. If a dog bit into him and chewed on your wire, he's barely even going to feel anything. So there is really no regulations in our area anyway as to how deep you have to bury those, because that wire does get converted into very safe 12 volt as it is in the ground. So how we select our transformer is based on wattage. So for example, this is a 150 watt transformer from FX Luminaire, and the way we've determined this one is pretty simple. We have approximately 30 lights on this property, and each of those lights averages just over 4 watts. So 30 times 4 is 120. So we're only using 120 watts, or only require 120 watts for this project. But you always want to size your transformer approximately 20% higher, just to cure any inefficiencies or anything like that, and give a little bit of extra room also if you ever want to add on down the road. So 150 watt transformer will easily handle our load of lights. And the other reason I like this one too is this actually has a 15 volt tap here. So if you watch a lot of old videos on YouTube about landscape lighting, they talk a lot about voltage drop. That's because most of those landscapers and those designers are using halogen fixtures. If you're getting a quote for a system and somebody's still quoting you on a halogen fixture, I would run for the hills, because they're really just trying to sell you a cheaper system. It doesn't make any sense nowadays with LED. And the reason that we can run 30 lights on one transformer is because LED uses so much less power. You might save money on the fixtures by going the halogen route, but then you're gonna have to get a massive transformer to run that, and you gotta be really careful on how you run the wire and voltage drop and all those types of things. What I'm telling you is that if you choose a transformer like this that has a 15 volt tap, you can run 20 to 30 lights off of this transformer, upwards of 300 plus feet of wire out, without ever having to worry about enough voltage drop, because a good quality fixture is going to run even if it only gets 9 volts on it. A crappy quality fixture is not going to, but if you get a good one, they're all designed to run between 9 and 10 volts, which means you can lose a lot of power along the way, and that light is still going to run properly. So another reason why you don't want to skimp on a fixture, because it is going to cause you more problems down the road. Today I'm going to talk to you about one of the questions I get asked most often is about voltage drop and how many lights can I fit on my transformer, and how should I wire those lights. And if you've watched other videos from YouTube in the past, not ours, but like older videos, or read a bunch of stuff and blogs online and stuff, it usually refers to landscape lighting, and a lot of that old stuff is talking about incandescent and halogen fixtures, which just use a lot more wattage per light. So that's why voltage drop was such an issue. The beauty of technology getting better and LEDs coming out is now that's less of a concern, because you know, a typical uplight or spotlight like this in the old days would have been a 20 or 35 watt halogen bulb in it, which means you put 5 of those on one transformer that's 150 watts. So 5 times 20 is roughly 100 watts, and you want to oversize that transformer. So you need a transformer that is at least 120 watts or bigger just to run 5 lights, right? And the other thing to remember too is that with halogen fixtures, if they're not getting the optimum voltage, so if it's dropping below 12 volts, then they're not going to operate as bright as they should. That's why typically if you have a halogen system or an oldest system, you'll have this big massive transformer that's like 600, 900, 1200 watts. It's because that was necessary in order to run those lights. With LED, you don't necessarily need that now, because now a typical light like this, and you'll hear it referred to a lot as like a 20 watt equivalent halogen lamp, is now only about 4 to 4.5 watts of LED. So now you can fit, you know, 4 to 5 times as many lights on the exact same transformer, the exact same line, without worrying about as much voltage drop. And the other thing is, if you're getting a good quality light with a good quality bulb, the new bulbs are designed to actually run on as low as 9 volts of power. So they'll generally range from anywhere from 9 to 10 to 15 volts, and you'll still get near 100% maximum efficiency out of that lamp. Whereas with a halogen, if you weren't getting the proper voltage, that light just wouldn't work. And that's why voltage drop was so important. So if you think of that now, it brings me to 2 points. One is why we have our try it before you buy it offer, which I'll explain in a second. And two, now say you have a transformer that produces 15 volts, which a transformer like this, that's exactly what this is. The two taps for the wires in here are actually 15 volt taps, so they put out a little bit more than 12 volts, so that you can afford to lose some of that voltage along the line and still have this light run optimally. And I'll show you guys a chart in a bit that explains voltage drop a little bit better, but for example now, I can lose up to 6 volts of power from this transformer to the farthest light in the field and still have this run at 100% efficiency. That's why voltage drop is not as big a concern when it comes to LED. Now, if you're doing a massive system with 40, 60, 80 lights, then there's some things there you might want to consider. But a lot of times I'll even show you guys a couple shortcuts that will help you guys so you don't even have to worry.
Hey guys, so here's a voltage drop chart for 12-2 low voltage cable. And the reason I show you this chart is because 12-2 cable is probably going to be your most common landscape lighting wire that you're going to use. If you're using an LED system, it's going to be very, very, very rare that you're ever going to have to get any bigger than 12 gauge. So it's not often you're going to have to use 10 or 8 gauge. That wasn't always the case when there was halogen fixtures out there, because they just required larger wire in order to not lose the voltage required to run those lights. But 12 gauge is going to be your most common and your most typical, so this will be a good starting point. But basically I'll show you why voltage drop is not as big of an issue. As you can see here on your left, we have our wattage load. So the way you determine this is you basically add up the number of lights that you have and their wattage, and it's going to tell you your total wattage load. So if you have 10 lights that are each 5 watts, you're going to have 50 watts 50 watts on any one line at a time. So let's say you've got 20 lights and they're each 5 watts light, so you have 100 watts of light. Now, as I just explained to you, a good quality, a highly efficient LED bulb is going to run as low as 9 volts is all it requires to run at almost 100% efficiency. So again, if you are using a good size transformer that has a 15 volt tap, 15 minus 9 equals 6, which means you can lose 6 volts of power along that cable before you're going to have any issues with that light. So if we look at this, say we're at 100 watts and we can only lose 6 volts along that line. Well, you're looking down here now, it takes us to run almost 300 feet of cable to lose 6 volts along that line if we have all of 20 lights on that one cable. So 300 feet is a lot. So if you're concerned about that and you think, oh, I got to run more than that, well, then all you do is, like I'll show you in the next video, is you basically just split that wire into 2 at the transformer, so that now instead of 20 lights, you got 10 lights on each of those. So now you're only at 50. So you can see now you can run way more than 300 feet out. The chart doesn't even go past that, but you can probably run close to 500 feet off those 10 lights and not have any issues with voltage drop. But this is a great chart because it tells you, hey, how many lights do I have? How much wattage am I going to be running? Typically off one transformer, you're not usually running much more than 20 lights. If you are, I'll show you guys some tricks for that. But if you are, you can see here how you can go down, easily 250 feet plus almost 300 feet before you run into that voltage drop of 6 volts that would cause any issues with those lights. So this is come back to this chart and to this video here if you guys need any help with that, and I'll show you. Even if you get down to 180 watts, you can still run your wire out 150 feet before you have to worry about that. And like I said, in the next part of this video, I'll show you guys some tricks on how you can even eliminate this even further. So I hope that helps.
Hey guys, so hopefully that gives you a little bit better understanding of how voltage drop works, and a really simple way to understand why it's not that much of an issue. But now I'll show you guys a couple shortcuts to even get around that, because as you can see from that chart, I mean, you can easily put 20-30 lights on a transformer like this and really not have to worry about voltage drop. But if it is something you're concerned about, because say you have an acreage or a large property where you have to run a lot of wire, there's two things that you can do that will almost near eliminate the worry of voltage drop. The first is, if you're concerned about it, just go buy another transformer, right? And put them on opposite ends of the property, run half your lights off that transformer, half your lights off that transformer, no issues. Now you know you're gonna have enough. So you can put, 25 lights on each transformer, which is 50 lights. That's a lot of lights on a property now, and you don't have to worry about voltage drop. So that's one option. Another option that's even more cost effective now is, say you have your transformer, okay, and you want to run your wire out to your lights. You can run them in sequence, do it whatever is easiest for you. But so you have your two wires from your 2 gauge, sorry, not 2 gauge, but 2-stranded 12 gauge wire, or 14 gauge or 18 gauge. Just a general rule of thumb: if you stick with 12 gauge and you're running a system that's got 30 lights or less, 12 gauge is more than large enough. You can get smaller, but the cost difference is not that. It's not that big of a difference just to stick with 12 gauge, and then you know you're going to be covered for voltage drop and stuff. But if you are still worried, and say you have 30 lights and you're like, I just don't know if my transformer is going to handle it, then what you can do is take your 2 wires, put one in the common tap and one in the 12-volt tap, and then run that out to one set of lights, so say to 15 lights out there, and then you take another separate wire and you use those same terminals, because there's room to fit more than one wire in each of those terminals. You do the same thing, but now you just run this wire out to those lights. So now you've got a wire running out there, you've got a wire running out there. Each of those wires is only now taking 15 lights, so a fraction. Now you're cutting your wattage in half, which means now you can run even further out there without running into that voltage drop, which I showed you on that chart. Really takes a lot of wire to run into those issues, especially if you're using a larger transformer that has a 15-volt tap. Now you can lose up to those 6 volts along the line and still have your lights run optimally. And that's why when we sell our premium kits and put together larger kits with 20+ lights, we're usually upgrading to a slightly larger transformer like this. It's only 150 watts, but it has a slightly larger terminal on it, so it gives you a little bit more juice, so you don't have to worry about that. Plus, the terminals on there are just a little bit bigger, so now you can fit those 2 wires going out to both directions of the property or wherever you have to. That's going to help eliminate that voltage drop even further. So I hope that helps you guys just understand voltage drop a little bit better. There's a lot more things I can go into. We're going to do some more comprehensive videos here over the next couple months, and some real basics about how to lay out your lights and all that kind of stuff. The other thing I didn't mention, and I get this question a lot too, is that a lot of people will ask, well, you have the 2 wires, the 2 strands coming off your 12-2 wire. Now, is there a positive and a negative, and do I have to keep that consistent throughout all the lights? And the answer is no. It's not like stereo wire where there's like a plus and a negative and you got to keep that flow throughout. It doesn't matter what you put into the common, what you put into the 12-volt tap, and what you hook onto your light, as long as you have your 2 wires and your 2 wires from your fixture, and you have one of each of those wires from your 12-2 going to each of the wires on the light. It doesn't matter if it's the same one throughout all the lights. There's no positive or negative. It just needs that consistent circuit to make those lights work. So again,
one last thing I will talk about is if you want to even make your system a little bit better and make it a smart Wi-Fi system, an easy way to do that, this is one that we use. It's called a Wion Outdoor Wi-Fi Timer. There's lots of smart plugs like this. The reason I like this one is just it's easy to use. You just plug it in and go. It has its own app. It's compatible with Amazon Alexa, and it's designed to sit outside. And basically all you do is take this out of the box, plug this into your GFCI receptacle, and then plug your transformer into this and follow the steps to set it up. And then you just have to put your transformer in the on position and let this be your timer and your switch that you can turn on from Wi-Fi from anywhere in the world.
So one of the things I get asked is how to bury the wire. In a mulch area like this, what I like to do is just with a flat shovel or a rake, is just move the mulch or whatever you have back from wherever you want to lay that wire. And then I just go around with a flat-ended spade and basically just make a cut and just loosen that dirt up. and give it a good place for the wire to sit. And then afterwards, a tool like this is going to be your best friend. You can find this in any garden section. I don't even know what it's called. A flat-ended screwdriver will work well too. The reason I like this is because it's got the two little prongs that you can that helps just push the wire down. And then after, I just go and I start pushing that wire down into the dirt and get it nice and deep. Because this is low voltage, you don't have to have it 18 inches or a foot down. And then the other thing I like to do just to help secure it is every once in a while, just a simple landscape stake like this, and just throw it over the wire and hammer it down, and that'll just help that as you're gardening and stuff, if you happen to dig it up or catch it with a rake, all that wire is not going to pull out. It's just going to help secure it down. So I showed you how to bury wire in the mulch beds. Basically the same idea in the grass. Still using my flat-ended shovel. I just go around and make a little slit in the grass and just lift that grass up. And really, you only need to get the wire deep enough so that it doesn't get hit with an aerator, or it doesn't get, cut if you're doing any work. And then once I've gone and dug my slit in the grass, I just take my wire and basically lift up the grass, and again push my wire all the way down as deep as I can get it, and then you stop over it and you can barely even tell we were there. So even before you go ahead and bury all your wires, something you might want to do is just plug your lights all back into the transformer, get them wired in, and test them and make sure that all your connections are working properly. If not, then you might have to go and redo some. But once you go around and you test it and all your lights are working, that's when you can go back and you can start to bury everything. And even before you do that, you might want to adjust your lights. Most of the lights you're going to use are going to be adjustable in some way or form, and you want to get those angled however you have in your plan to highlight whatever feature it is that you want. A general rule of thumb is whatever angle you think you need, I would always try and put it a little bit higher or more upright. So if you think you need to aim it like this, I would probably try and aim it like this. Just as a general rule of thumb, I usually find you need to aim it a little higher than you actually think you do. And I would also recommend trying to make most of these adjustments at night when you can actually see what that light's going to look like on that feature that you're trying to accent.